Welcome to Focused on Forward. The purpose of this podcast is to focus on recovery from life situations, be it a disease, chronic or acute, perhaps the loss of someone so dear to you in death, or a change of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Focused on Forward. Today, we have the privilege of talking with Jay Cee. Now, you may not recognize the name, but he has a podcast that I want you guys to go out, check out, and listen. I'm a subscriber. I love his show, and so I wanted him on today because his show is called Dad Swag. And the reason I like it, well, I'm a dad, and I like hearing what other dads are doing and what they're trying to do and why, and how they're trying to improve themselves. But even the better part about it is that a lot of parenting shows can get into a point where they talk almost down to the father or the mother and say, oh, well, you should be doing this, or you should be doing that. I have yet to hear anything like that from either Jay Cee or his guests on this show. So it's it's upbeat, it's encouraging, and it's uplifting to each of the parents that are listening. So as dad, I give it the dad seal of approval from this end. So Jay Cee, thank you so much for being a guest on Focused on Forward today.
Thank you so much for having me, man. We've been planning this for a couple months now, so I'm happy we were able to put it together finally.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, everybody that comes on the show, there's always a backstory of what somebody has to deal with, what they go through in life, what they're working around in order to get them to where they're at, to where, as our show is called, so where they can become focused on forward. So what I'd like to do is turn the microphone over to you here and let you tell our audience a little bit about who Jay Cee is, what he's gone through in life, and how we've gotten to the point of you sitting here talking to me on Focused on Forward.
Absolutely. Well, once again, a huge fan of Focus on Forward, man. And, for you to have reached out to me, I think it was via a common post. We were in a group together, and you reached out to me, and that was an honor for me. Any opportunity that I get to either talk about my story or hear someone else's story, whether I'm sharing or I'm receiving the story, I'm very grateful because I try to learn from other people's experiences. I feel like we should be just striving to be 1% better every day, just 1%. It's not too much, but if you can be better, then be better, and the way I feel that I get better is by learning from not just my experience, not just my success and my failures, but other people's as well,
Mm-hmm.
So huge fan of the show, like I said, man, and it is definitely a pleasure and an honor to be here, man.
Oh, thank you.
My story. I've gone through a lot in life, man. You've heard the podcast. I try to be the thing about me is I try to be transparent, because you never know which one of those details, because somebody could say, that doesn't really necessarily relate to me, or it kind of relates to me, or it doesn't, but it's just one of those details that you leave out that could change somebody's perspective, could change somebody's life, could change somebody's outlook on their life, on their fatherhood journey, on their own life, in general. So, growing up, I want to call it, I was in 2 single parent houses, but both my parents were in a relationship, and I'm African American Filipino. So I'm African American and a Pacific Islander. Some people call it Asian, some people call it Pacific Islander. According to the DOJ, we are Pacific Islander, so I say Pacific Islander.
Fair enough.
But I grew up. I grew up always feeling like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't Black enough. I wasn't Pacific Islander enough. I'm 5'10", so I wasn't tall enough, like, and that's obviously now, but there's something to be said about that feeling of not being good enough,
Hmm.
and then when you live in a household at a young age where you feel like your mother uh, confirms that for you, you kind of go down a bad hole, man. Go down this rabbit hole of life where you're just kind of sputtering. You don't know what it is, what to do. And at a young age, it's kind of hard to decipher what those emotions are. You may know right from wrong, but but sometimes there's peace and chaos. I don't know if that makes sense to some people.
Okay.
You look at some people's relationships, whether it be with their spouse, whether it be with their family, and a lot of people self-sabotage because they're comforted by the chaos, they're comforted by the turmoil. And that was kind of me for a while. At a young age, I didn't know my dad until I was about 6 7 years old. And my mom, she was with this a man. we'll call him a man for lack of better words. He's not a man in my book, but
For the
um
for the purpose of this discussion.
yeah. Yeah. But she was with this man, and he caused a lot of childhood trauma for me. Um, my mom, I've always felt like she loved me conditionally. She was very passionate, but she didn't have much compassion. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it does.
When she wanted to be a mom, she was very passionate about it when
Hmm.
she wanted to be. But when it came to compassion, when it came to the I'm sorry's or the I love yous, they only came if it was tied to an agenda, you
Okay.
know. Um, so at an early age, man, I was physically abused, sexually abused, mentally and emotionally abused. Um, my mom used to say things to me like, I wish I had an abortion. My mom actually
Oh,
had a
wow.
miscarriage. Yeah, my mom actually had a miscarriage. And when I was, this is a little further down the line, but just an example of the things I've heard in my lifetime. She had a miscarriage, and she used to tell me that she wishes I was the miscarriage, and
Oh,
not
man.
um, and just I don't want you. You're not my son. Those kind of things, right?
Soul crushing words to hear from your mother.
Oh yeah, especially when that's the only parent you know for a while. You
Sure.
know, um, I've been thrown through tables. Her love interest at that time was very heavily on drugs,
Okay.
um, and he used to force me. And what I mean by force, I mean by physically force. I was in elementary school, and he used to make me stand against the wall and watch him have sex with other women in the thought process that he was teaching me how to be a man. Right now, when I say sexual abuse, it's not that I was ever touched or I mean, he he asked he asked some of the women that he was with, to touch me, but it never went that far.
Hmm.
I would kind of break down and cry, and then I would get beat for crying because I wasn't a man. But I was
Yeah.
young, and it was wrong.
Oh, absolutely
um
was. Yeah.
but he used to force me to watch him have sex with other women, and then if I tried to tell my mom, I'd get beat. And my beatings weren't with the belt. Well, the belt was a Disneyland trip. You know what I mean? I've been beat in the shower with curtain rods, and I don't mean the curtain rods that hold your curtains. I mean, those curtains that everyone hates, those white curtains
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
flimsy, the plastic ones. Well, the stick that turns that thing is kind of flimsy. It has a whipping effect, kind of
Has tremendous,
plasticky.
yeah, tremendous bend to it if you get swung.
Yeah. So I've been beat in the shower with that. I've passed out with my head held underwater. Uh, it's not as dark now, but I've had my neck slit. Um, you know,
Oh, man.
things like that. I'd come home and he'd be face deep in a pile of coke. And we only had a one bedroom apartment, so when my mom was at work, he would do whatever he wanted to do, so um, I would wake up in the morning with, coke on my skin, coke on my shirt, it was just a crazy time. And the time that I remember really just finally feeling defeated, like no one loved me, no one cared about me, was uh, I had just got my yellow belt in Kaju Kempo, and I remember my mom and her man at the time, um, they had went out for the night. They came home late, and I was awakened to the sound of skin on skin, and I knew he had hit her. I don't remember if it was her screaming that woke me up or if it was just the sound of contact that woke me up. At that age, it sounded the same.
Sure.
I woke up, and they were in the living room, and like I said, we were in a one bedroom, so I was home alone, by the way, um, and in elementary school. I remember seeing him full mounted on her. For those who don't know what full mount is, if you watch UFC, it's when both legs
Mhm.
are under the person's hips and you're straddling.
Yeah.
And he was pummeling her like
Yeah.
a man. Now,
It's a
mind you,
domination position.
absolutely. And my mom is, like I said, I'm African American and Filipino. My mom is 4'9" Filipino woman, and she has a tendency to date these 6'2", 6'3", 6'5", just big from the
Big,
street black
yeah.
guys. You know what I
Big
mean?
dudes. Yeah.
Except for my dad, and I'll get to that.
Okay.
But I just remember throwing my body into him as much as I could, and it nudged him just enough for him to kind of get off full mount. And then all I could do was just lay on top of her. And from there, I took the beating for her. He didn't stop. He remounted both of us, and I was punched in the head, I was punched in the back, I was punched in the neck. She cried and told me, "Go back in the room. It's okay." I remember watching his silhouette leave the apartment. He walked past the bedroom, and we were on the first floor. And she came in, and this is probably why I don't like the movie The Ring, because if you ever watch The Ring, when
Hmm.
the girl's hair is just all the way down and she's kind of has that sluggish limp with the dress,
Yeah.
it's kind of what my mom looked like in the moonlight. It was hitting her the right way, and she was limping. And I thought for a moment we were gonna like embrace each other and kind of console each other, and we'll maybe come up with a plan to get out of here.
Hmm.
At such an early age, I was already thinking about my escape route.
Right. Yeah.
But she beat me. She beat me with his belt and the buckle side, um, and blamed me for him leaving.
Oh my.
So I made my first parenting choice at 7 years old. I want to say 7 years old, 7 or 8,
Okay.
maybe 8. I walked to school the next day, and I told myself I would never put my hands on whatever kid that I have, and I would never put my hands on my wife or my girlfriend or any girl.
Right.
Um, and to this day, that still reigns true, and it will forever reign true. But I tell
Absolutely.
people all the time that parenting doesn't start when you become a parent. It starts when you comprehend who your parents are and the kind of environment you're raised in, right? Because once you start taking things from your dad, once you start taking things from your mom, if your dad likes to use his hands and he works on cars, eventually that may be a trait that you take and then you pass down to your kids,
Right.
right? If he's a hard worker and he knows how to get money in order to pay for the car to get fixed, well then work ethic in school and things like that may be certain things that you take from his journey that you pass to your kids. I just knew domestic abuse wasn't something that I wanted to pass to my kids. So that was my first generational curse that I broke. So
All right.
that was kind of my childhood growing up, um,
So
running. And then go ahead.
uh, where was your natural father during all of this time?
So I live in California. I'm from Pittsburgh, in the Bay Area, and
Okay.
Bay Area, San Francisco, people correlate the same thing. My dad lived in Sacramento, so he was about 2.5 hours away. But so here's how this all ties together, because it sounds kind of random, but let me give you a shock factor and the oh my goodness factor.
Okay.
So the man who did all the abuse, the man who basically used me as a punching bag all my life, used my mom as a punching bag, and my dad. The reason my dad wasn't in my life is because my mom was telling my dad I wasn't his son. The reason that that was so believable is because my dad and my mom's love interest are half brothers.
Oh, okay.
So, so my mom was actually with her love interest first. They broke up. She met my dad. They had me over some time, and then he went back to Sacramento, not knowing that she was pregnant, and then he stepped in, and then that became my dad. So for the longest time, I'm trying to figure out, this man is now coming into my life and telling me that he wants to take me, to ice cream and have a relationship with me and try to build this bond. But you're telling me that that's not my dad, but I still have to go. So there was a lot of tug and pull and confusion. So
Yeah.
that I can blame my dad for not trying harder, but I don't, because if someone's telling you that that's not your kid and you're young, I can see why, especially by the statistics, why he would say, okay, well, if it's not my kid, then that's not my kid, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I really didn't know my dad until I was about 6 or 7, and then from there it was kind of like sporadic, visitations, and then it started getting more serious where he started fighting for custody, and I started having a more serious routine with going to see him, every other weekend.
Okay. All right. So did you eventually leave your mother's home and go move in with your father?
I did. I did. At the age of 12 and a half.
Okay.
Um, I moved with my dad, and um, I say that it was kind of two single parent households, even though they both had somebody, because my stepmother, um, it was kind of like even though I didn't have any siblings right away, they ended up having a girl, my little sister, uh, but it was kind of like a Cinderella, like she didn't really like me much, you know what I mean? The thing that
Sure.
she did like to do was discipline me. And I can kind of thank her for the kind of discipline that she gave me. There's a kind of discipline where people say, oh my God, well, you just beat me. I remember being a kid and being like, hearing my dad lecture me and talk about how disappointed he is in me and
Sure.
this and this. And I'm just like, yo, can you just hit me and get it over with? Like, this is dragging on.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you're gonna do, and let's be on with it. But it never got to that point with my dad, and probably because my dad is the martial artist in the family, and
Okay.
that's how it got passed on to me. So he showed a lot of restraint and a lot of control, especially with knowing what he knows and respecting the arts. Um, but there was disciplines like making me hold uh Bibles with my arms stretched out, or things like that. My dad and not getting into religion, but if I told a lie or something like that, he would make me go into the Bible and write
Sure.
the verses that
Write the
pertain
verses.
to
Yeah.
what I did or didn't do.
Yeah. Writing verses was never fun. I had to do that a couple times.
I'm pretty sure I wrote the whole First Testament, and I'm pretty sure I wrote, and if not, I'm pretty sure I wrote all of Psalms and Proverbs. But and then he would also make me, and this is actually how this actually played into my future career as a singer songwriter. He would make me write the definitions of lies and deceitfulness and dishonesty and
Okay.
things like that. So if I got caught chewing gum in class, then I'd have to write the definition of the origin of gum. Like it was things like that, that he did that really
Okay.
ended up shaping. I believe it really shaped uh, how I figured I wanted to be a parent. Because even though I didn't like him in the moment, looking back on it now, I realize how impactful that was for me.
Right.
So um, Yeah. You know, so
Well, I would also have to think that it helps you understand and realize that discipline could be meted out without laying of hands, and that
absolutely.
there's ways to do things, um, as a parent, as a, you know, to handle the issue at hand without getting physical. There's other ways around it, and um, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. You're absolutely right. And, by making that commitment to myself that I'd never lay my hands on my future kids, or my future wife, this seemed to be an alternative because I hated it. So I knew, hey, if I can at least be effective in this way, um, I'm
sure,
not only educating, but I'm showing that there's a better way to handle it. Because all I knew with my mom, you know, see, don't get me wrong, I don't want to bash my mom, but at the same time, the truth is the truth.
right,
I can only say what I went through, and a lot of people say, what's the hater? A hater is someone who talks about other people without substance. You know what I mean? If I'm
hmm
telling you, if I'm saying facts that are necessary, like, hey, Joe, he's kind of dishonest. He didn't, pay up when he said he was going to pay up, and now it's been some months, and then that's not hating on you. That's just telling a fact. Now, if I'm
correct,
saying like, oh yeah, he's a sleazeball, he's a bum, and then now we're hating. That's unnecessary,
right.
right?
You've got nothing to corroborate your story
There's no
with, and
merit. You know what I mean?
yeah,
There's no
yeah,
merit
yeah,
to it, and unfortunately, it's sad to say, but this story, this trauma, this pain has been reiterated to my mom over and over and over again by me, and unfortunately by my sisters who were later born. And they went through some of the same things, not exactly, thank God, but some of the same things.
okay,
And it comes down to, she doesn't love us like she loves her relationship. She doesn't want to be
hmm
alone.
right,
My mom was most proud of me when it felt like my mom was most proud of me when um, I would win a martial arts tournament, uh, when I went to prison, which is crazy, and not necessarily proud of me, but she would gloat about me the most. And when I signed a record deal, and so those things, because she felt like it gave her bragging rights, I guess. And I feel like the prison thing, it stems from when I was younger. She would tell, when she was no longer with this guy and she was trying to figure out who her next interest was going to be, she would always tell him as a young age, oh, you got to ask my son to date me, right? And then so you get these, thuggish guys come and say, hey, little man, can I date your mom? And I'm looking at them like, F you. And they're like, oh, he's funny, But then when I
hmm
when I grow up and I'm like, F you, my voice is a little deeper. You're looking at all the martial arts trophies on that's displayed in the
right,
house. Now you're like, I'm not gonna ask. Now it's kind of like a no longer a, hey, I'm playing around and I'm cute. Now it's a mano y mano. Like, I'm not gonna ask another man for permission. Now you're
hmm
trying to come into a household that there's already a man established. Even though I was young, my mom established me to be the man of the house right away. You know,
hmm
so that kind of led to some fights all the way up to the week I went to prison.
okay,
So yeah, I mean, it's been a roller coaster of a childhood.
yeah, it sounds like it.
I wouldn't
So
I wouldn't change it though. It definitely shaped who I am as a man and who I am as a father, who I've decided to become as a father. So it sucks. It sucked, but
right.
I'm thankful for it. I'm
No,
thankful
I, I
for it.
I think that's very important though, that you acknowledge the silver lining of the situation that you went through. I think because sometimes we can get so buried in the what happened versus what can I take from what happened.
Absolutely.
There's, and I know this saying does not apply to every situation in life, because there are some things where you just cannot take a silver lining out of it.
Yeah,
But if at all possible, those silver linings, those little shimmering, glimmering lights are the things that kind of help us identify where we can make those changes, where we can better ourselves, where
definitely.
we can say, okay, well, I used the name Joe earlier, so I'll use that one again. So Joe showed me that he was going to act this way. Okay, I don't want to act that way. Here's what I can do to be different than Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those things help us. So when you're looking back over your life's experiences, you're able to see how your mother acted and say, okay, I don't want to act that way.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
able to see
definitely.
how the men in her life were treating her and her children, and you can say, I'm never going to do that. I don't want to act that way. So it's good that
Absolutely.
you're able to acknowledge that, see that, and find the positive for yourself. So let's talk about how you got to the point of where you decided that I need to be focused on moving forward in my own life.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Focused on Forward is being brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. And if you haven't heard about it, well, let me explain it to you. First off, Anchor is free. And there are creation tools that are going to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor is going to distribute your podcast for you, so it'll be heard on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many others. And you'll be able to make money right away from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in just one place. So to get it, download the free Anchor app from your app store or go to anchor.fm to get started. And now back to Focused on Forward.
Prison, man. Like I said, a week before my mom, and this isn't why I went to prison, and I won't go into why.
We don't need to. That's fine.
But I was sentenced to 2 years, and a week before, my mom's then fiance, he was on one side of the door with a Desert Eagle, and I was on the other side of the door with a shotgun, and he was saying, come outside, and I'm saying, if you step on the property, I'm going to blow through the door. And so now we're doing this back and forth, and he was trying to, he left a message on my mom's, voicemail saying he was going to kidnap her and all these other things. So it just goes to show you, like, it up until from my childhood, I went to prison at 18. I'm sorry, 19.
Okay.
Up until then, her demographic of men and choices never changed. So this isn't just something I dealt with in my childhood. This is something I'm about to be 32 in June. This is something I've been dealing with my entire life. So,
sure.
But when I went to prison, my girlfriend then, my wife now, she was pregnant, and part of me was still hardened, hey, I'm in prison. I gotta be tough. I gotta have this grit about me, they slapped me for 2 years, it's nothing, I can do that, that kind of mentality, right?
Sure.
Inside, I'm freaking out because I don't know what's gonna happen in prison. I've seen blood in, I've blood out. I've seen American Me. I've seen all of these. I've seen all these documentaries about prison. I don't know why I stayed up all those nights watching Locked Up and all these things, but now I'm kind of like, oh, and I'm in California, and I'm going to San Quentin. Oh man, this is scary,
Right.
But that all changed for me because shortly after my son was born, actually day of, we found out that he had cancer. He tested positive for TMD leukemia and Down syndrome.
Oh.
And at that point, I was like, look, it's no longer about me. Like, it's not about me anymore. I have another life to live. And if I have to die in order for him to live, then please take me now. Like, I don't care what it means I have to do. What do I have to do? My spirit was leading me to say, hey, do you want to be foolish or do you want to be a father? And I wasn't ready to commit. I mean, I would say, yeah, I'm ready to be a father, but I wasn't ready to commit my emotions. I wasn't ready to commit my mentality. I was just saying it. It was very surface. I wasn't meaning it. I wasn't ready to let go of my pride. Pride to me is the killer of everything. It's a silent killer.
Oh,
Pride to kill
absolutely.
your,
Oh, yeah.
pride to kill your relationships, pride to kill everything,
Yeah.
right? Every negative comment that comes out of your mouth, every negative thought that comes, to your head, every negative action that you do comes to pride,
Hmm.
and or comes down to pride. And I wasn't ready to let it go yet. I was too proud. And finally, when I found out he had cancer and I may not see my son, that's kind of when I was like, okay, what can I do from here? And I applied to uh, give him a bone marrow transplant. But in the state of California, you're not allowed to do that. Um, so with the bone marrow transplant denial, I I went down this rabbit hole of feeling like I'm useless, I'm nothing, you know, what can I do? From there, I made the decision. I gotta focus on getting out of here. I gotta focus on not only getting out of here, but what am I gonna do after I get out of here? The record deal is over. That's done. Um, and maybe we can talk about that another time. But I was signed to Sony for 2 years, right out of high school, from 2006 to 2008.
Okay.
And you know, and then I went to prison in 2008. But yeah, so it kind of went down this bad spiral. But what can I do for myself? What can I do to better my son? I feel like I failed him already because I haven't broken the generational curse of imprisonment.
Hmm.
We live in a day and age of this, you know, activism and racial injustice, whatever. And I don't like to talk politics, but when it comes to the statistics of African American men in prison,
Hmm.
it's high. It's high.
Understood. Yeah.
And so and when I speak on generational curses, I do mean my bloodline, but I also mean men that look like me, right?
Hmm.
Because now not only is it a generational curse because it's in my generation, but now I'm following a statistical trend, and I wanted to break that. I had every desire to break that, and I failed. So I feel like I'm failing my son. Okay, so what can I do in here? So I started getting my college credits. I started doing whatever I needed to do in order to get myself from here to here, so that when the doors open up for me and I see the life again, I have a path. You know,
Hmm.
so um, for me, focusing on forward started when I was in San Quentin, and I was ready to move on. Um, Most times in people's lives, well, we never have all the answers, right? I tell people all the time on my podcast, don't ever come to my podcast or tune into my podcast thinking I have all the answers, or I'm going to give you the answers or tell you how to do something. I'm going to
Right.
tell you how I'm doing it. And if it works for you, great. If you have a better
Exactly.
way to do it, I'm open to hear it. This is all about iron sharpening iron. This is about you helping me helping you,
Right.
as men, as fathers, and for the women that tune in as well. But I had more questions on what can I do to be better than um, dwelling on why am I still here? How did I get myself here? Prison is full of men who are saying, because this happened to me, because this happened to me, because this happened to me, this is why I am the way I am, as opposed to saying, because this happened to me, this happened to me, and this happened to me, this is why I refuse to be the way,
Right.
So um, for me, what happened to me, why I went to prison, had nothing to do with what happened to me. It was just a choice that I made, and I paid the price for it.
Sure. So yeah, there's a difference there though between placing blame and accepting responsibility. So you,
Absolutely.
so you can say, yeah, all these things happened, and it made me do these things. That's
Yeah.
placing blame. Or you
Yeah.
can say, all these things happened, and this is why I did what I did. This is why I made the choice I made, which sounds like what you did. You
Yeah.
acknowledge the fact that you made some poor decisions that led to a poor outcome, a poor consequence, and But it sounds like you've learned a great lesson from that, and I think that's reflected in our conversation, and frankly, the conversations that I've heard on your own podcast there.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of your podcast, let's talk about that. Let's jump forward a few years
Okay.
to the point of starting the podcast for you. So, what was the impetus for you wanting to start hashtag Dad Swag?
Another defining who am I moment. So we fast forward some years, right? I got home, and statistically I shouldn't be in the position that I'm in now. I won't go to the company, but I run a big branch in the state of California. So
Okay.
and because of my educational background, I never finished college. I just got college credits, just to keep my mind busy, my my body busy, and out of trouble, because San Quentin's a violent place. So if you weren't doing something, then they'd be asking you to do something else. So as long as I wasn't in eyesight of people, then I could be, maneuver differently. Now, for me, I've been blessed to have the position I'm in, but I shouldn't have it. And so I don't take that for granted. And I work my ass off, for that. I work hard, because I know that it's always in my mind. I beat out somebody who went to Yale. I beat out somebody who, has these credentials, and I didn't have it. So this is I'm not going to take for granted. Well, when you have a family, as a man, men sometimes we get very complacent in our marriages. And that's another silent killer. But complacency is also pride. So again, it goes down to pride, right? But complacency in marriage, I was telling my guys at work, if you get complacent here, I'm going to fire you, because I want you to be comfortable. And comfortable means that you can come in on your shift and I can say, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z before you clock out. And comfortability says, oh yeah, I'm good with that. I can do that. And I can move. Complacency says, hey, I did my 8, I'm going to leave, right? Doing the bare minimum. Complacency in your marriage, and I'm telling my guys this, but I'm not following it, right? At least not to the letter. I'm not a deadbeat husband or a deadbeat father, but I could always be better. It's about that 1% better. And I'd come home and, oh, God forbid it be football season, because my wife would have dinner made and the boys would already be bathed, and she'd this is when I was drinking a beer every now and then. She'd bring me a beer, and if it was Thursday night football, that doesn't end until about 9 o'clock. So the boys are already asleep. My wife is already asleep. I'm coming upstairs, taking a shower, going to bed. I don't see them when they wake up, so it's like I don't see them, so that was being a shell of a father. That wasn't being a present father. Physically present is different from being invested, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I got hurt. I got severely hurt, and again, I can't go into details, but I was run over, and I was determined to be temporary, totally disabled, and that was 5 days before the pandemic hit for California, at least before our shutdown. And I went down another rabbit hole, man. I was like, who am I without a paycheck? Who am I as a man? Who am I as a husband? Who am I as a father when I'm not bringing in this paycheck? And
understand that
what do I provide? And I couldn't answer it. And that's where these questions came in. Who am I? And if you can't answer that question, then you have to do some soul searching. Well, I was bedridden, so I had nothing but time to do soul searching. But what was soul crushing is every time I heard the door close, I knew my wife was going out there to fend for herself. In a time where there was a pandemic and people were snatching up toilet paper left and right, and sanitizer and meat and canned foods and everything. And, it looked like I Am Legend in the stores, right?
Yeah.
That was my wife out there doing it. That was my wife bringing the groceries up. I pride myself. Look, I pride myself on being a one-take Jake. You asked me to get all the groceries from the car, one take. I'm bringing all back. I don't care. It could be 3 cases of water, and it don't matter. I'm
don't worry. I got this.
I got this. And but for her, I knew she wasn't. Not that she's not capable of it, but she wouldn't do that. So it's multiple trips upstairs, downstairs, to the kitchen. And I'm processing all this while I'm laying in the bed, and I'm looking at the news, and the news doesn't make it any easier. You're looking at the news and it's saying, yo, this is happening and this is happening and this is
Right.
happening. And you're kind of like, oh my God, my wife is into that. So the question was, who am I as a man? Who am I as a father? I'm sorry. I always say husband first and then father second, because my wife in my book comes first, because she's who I'm building my family with. My kids are who I'm building my family for. And I think that concept people lose sight of. And that's when relationships kind of get iffy, right? When you start
I like that.
when you start forgetting that you guys are not you and me, Tim, but I'm pretending my wife is in front of me.
I was picking up what you're laying down. We're good.
But you know, when you start forgetting that you and your wife are the foundational pieces, right? And then that your kids are the building blocks. That's kind of where your foundation gets shaky and you start losing sight of each other. So I always say, me as a man, me as a husband, and then me as a father. Who am I in those? And I couldn't answer that. And I started going to Instagram and looking at all these dad pages and what I can do if I'm injured and things like that. And some of the answers I couldn't answer that weren't answering my questions. So I started a podcast. I started writing it down first. I started writing a lot of these questions down. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask them in a podcast. And so my first run of it was just going live on Instagram and Facebook while I was injured, just looking at myself saying, hey, I'm back. I got a question. You know, what do you guys do when it feels like this? What do you guys do when your kids aren't calling for you and you haven't been in the room for an hour? You know, does it feel like you're absent? Does it feel like they could care do you feel like they could care less about your presence if you are not in the room? You know, and how does that make you guys feel? So these questions started kind of developing the podcast. And then I said, you know what? I think I'm gonna do this full time. You know, I don't know if I want to go back to work. So how can I do it the best? You know, and then I started just pumping out content, and everything starts with a question. Even though the title may be, you know, something like generational curses, you know, the question is, what are generational curses? You know, and how does it affect my life? You know, and from there, I just go about it being as transparent and honest and vulnerable, you know, as I can be.
That's good. Yeah, and you know, I mentioned earlier that I am a subscriber to your show, and one of the things I do honestly love about your show is that the transparency, and it's not just from you. I find that your guests, from what I can tell, are laying it as much on the line as you are, as to what they're talking about, how they felt, why they felt that way, what they're doing to better themselves and better their families and better, you know, their relationships with their children. And so for me, it's a very encouraging podcast. So I strongly encourage my listeners, if you're not already subscribing to #DadSwag, you really should be, especially if you're a father, you're a husband, you know, just give it a listen. There is something that you will take from that has value to what you're doing now and in the future. All right, and so we're at the point now, Jay Cee, in the show where I'd like to ask people, and I ask every single guest the following 2 questions. Okay, so looking back over the entirety of your journey, what is the single greatest lesson that you have learned?
Just be true to yourself. You can lie to everybody else. You can't lie. Only you know if you're putting in the work. Only you know if you're putting in the effort. Only you know in your heart if you're genuine. And you know, when you're true to yourself and you follow that, if that's your focal point, that's going to tell you all you need to know about who you are and who you want to be. Yeah. So I feel like, you know, real quick, if I'm just spitballing off the top of my head, the biggest thing I learned is to be true to myself. And you know, another example of that is kind of in the music industry. You know, I've taken a step back from the music industry because I wasn't being true to myself. You know, I grew a passion for music from 80s, 90s R&B.
Mhm.
The music that was making me popular was music that was disrespectful to my wife and would humiliate my kids. Me singing about being in a strip club, and I've never been to a strip club in my life. So I wasn't being true to myself.
Okay.
And sometimes when you seek validation from other people, you find it, but it's not true validation, right?
Sure.
So you have to validate yourself and be true to yourself first, and then people will accept you for who you are.
All right. Excellent. I like that. All right. The second question, which is pretty similar in its nature, looking back over your journey, what is the single greatest piece of advice that you've been given?
Kind of the same thing. So be a man of your word. you know
Hmm.
it's kind of simple and super cliche. I know a lot of people say it, but not a lot of people execute it. you know Let your yeses be yeses and your no's be no's, and let your handshake be firm. you know
Okay.
when I promise something to my kids, it happens. I promise something to my wife, it happens. If I don't promise you something, I shouldn't have to promise you something for you to know that it's true, right? It should just be my word. But if I'm saying, hey, yeah, this is a guarantee, believe in guarantee, I'll go through hell and high water to make it happen. But I won't
Okay.
promise something I can't guarantee.
There you
Right.
go. Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are the two things.
All right. Excellent. So where can people go to find out more about hashtag Dad Swag and Jay Cee? Where's the best place for people to look for you?
Yeah. Right now, if you want to catch the podcast, we are launching season 2 on the 1st of April. So we'll be back with a bang on season 2. And you can find it on all major streaming platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, and Amazon. And my Instagram is Dad Swag Podcast, and my Facebook is hashtag Dad Swag. And if you ever have any questions, concerns, advice, you just need an ear, I check my emails and I check my DMs and I get back to everybody. It's something I pride myself on, is I get back to everybody. Even if it's not right away, I promise you I get back to you. And it's me. It's not somebody posing as me. It's not somebody running my account. It's me, because I really believe in iron sharpening iron. And I really stand by the fact that if I can help you, if you can help me, then why not? So I'm here for you. If you need a ear, if you need some advice, if you just want to rant, if you want to say, hey, I hate your show, I'm here for all of it. So reach out to me any way you can.
Excellent. All right. Well, very good. And I hope that people do just that. It's, again, I've said it a couple times, but it's a show worth following and a show worth paying attention to. It has my attention. So again, Jay Cee, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for having a frank and open conversation with us here about your life, what you've gone through, how you've become focused on forward. I think it's a very good story of resiliency. So thank you for sharing.
Appreciate the opportunity and the platform, man. I love what you're doing.
Oh,
Please
thank you.
continue to do what you're doing. A lot of people need these amazing stories of success and how to focus on forward, and you're providing that, man. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right, guys, that's going to conclude us today for Focused on Forward.
Well, that concludes another episode of Focused on Forward. To be a guest of Focused on Forward, you can reach us through Twitter at podcastfof, through our Facebook page named Focused on Forward, or through email focusedonforward@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing each and every one of your stories that has yet to be told. So until then, be safe, be kind, and be loving to one another as you stay focused on forward.